And now we'll look at the very first movement of the Taiji form. The first movement of the form is not exactly a martial movement, although some people have felt compelled to make it this way. I have seen explanations of this movement of everything from pushing someone down to like ripping their head off or something like this. But I really think there's a much simpler explanation, and that is that all martial techniques usually begin with a raising of the hands of some kind. Because if someone can just hold your hands and keep them down, then how can you fight them? It's pretty difficult. In fact, men usually control women this way. They grab them by the wrists, and then the women have no recourse except to use their legs and kick or do something like this. Because it's assumed that the women will be unable to raise their hands. Now, this is critically dependent upon the back straightening exercise that we did in the previous lesson. If your back is not straight correctly, then this will not work. So you must understand, until that is perfected, don't expect this to work. Now, there's just a general concept here, that the arms raise, then they retract, then they go down. It's a little more complex than that, and in the actual teaching, there is a sort of internal movement of the arms. But this internal movement of the arms is not critical to this effect of being able to raise them even though someone is holding them down. So we won't really study this today, but we will maybe suggest it by the movement of the elbows and so forth. Now the movement is quite simple. I'll introduce Alessia and Sasha again, and you guys try to follow me, please. First, we'll straighten the back. Now, in teaching this, I said, do this first, and then this. Now, when you do this, you feel like you're working pretty hard on the legs, and you're working pretty hard on the upper back, but this area must feel completely relaxed, okay? Now, it's not usual to do this in two stages, that is, to first tip forward and then do this. In fact, you can do both at the same time. And that is the correct way to start the form. But that looks a lot like you're just using your pelvis to tuck under. So make sure that you are not introducing any effort or tension in the pelvic area, but you're straightening the back and releasing the legs simultaneously. Now when you do this, you feel like your head naturally comes up. You feel like, in fact, it's difficult to look down. So the thing they call suspended head top becomes a very natural effect. As long as you're keeping this. If at some point while you're doing the form, you lose this back like this, you'll discover you start looking down and you need to make an effort to look up. So straighten the back, sit down with the pelvis, and then you feel like you naturally look straight ahead like this. Now, this is sometimes contrasted with standard kind of Kung Fu or Shaolin technique. Shaolin technique involves kind of crouching like this, which is sometimes compared to sitting on a stool. Whereas our technique, the Taiji technique, looks more like you're sitting down in an easy chair, like this. So this is called Sung, sink and relax. It's usually translated as relax, but that doesn't quite convey it, because relax to most people just means don't do anything, just become lazy. This is far from lazy. As I said, you must make quite an effort in the upper back, and when you make this effort in the legs, you feel tension in the side here, not in the front. If you feel tension in these muscles, you're doing it wrong. But if you feel like there's a tension in the side of your legs, it's correct. So like I say, you can do both at the same time. Then, from this position, begin by turning the backs of the hands forward and the elbows backwards, like this. This is called the tiger's mouth. When it's closed, it's called the tiger eye. Here we have the hand open and the tiger's mouth. Now, just a brief thing about the hand. It could be much more complex, but the hand looks like it's caressing a big ball this way. In other words, and you want even space between the fingers, like this. The thumb is actually the longest digit on the hand. It looks like it starts here, but actually this is web. It starts way down here. So the thumb is actually quite a bit longer than even the longest finger. When you control the thumb, control it from its base. Don't control it from this second digit here. And you move it around like this, so that it points in the same direction as the fingers. So your thumb is not underneath, but to the side, like this. And then the hand is kept in this position. Don't let it tense up or the fingers move or anything, but the hand is always kept, sometimes called a wooden hand. You want the spaces here to be the same. And you'll notice when you actually do this, the third digit actually becomes longer than the first one. Whereas if you do like this, it looks like the first digit is longer than the third one. So when you relax the hand this way, you have this look. And this becomes a completely smooth curve here. So have your wooden hands pointed forward, elbows backwards, bend the wrist slightly. Straighten the back, sit down. Now from here, we want to raise the hands like this. This is the first move. Okay? Notice the elbows now raise up and come up. Okay? And let's see, I'd like you to turn this way so they can see it from the side. Okay? You just stay forward here. Okay? And you can stay from the front. All right? And do it with me. So first, preparation, and then like this. Now, one thing you must avoid here is bending the elbows. Don't do this. Don't raise your hands this way. But think of it just rotating straight from the shoulder, like this. Now, if the elbows are up, the hands will hang down like this. After we raise them, now you rotate the elbows down and the wrists like this. And now, even if you relax the wrist, the hands should still point forward. Try not to do this. Don't pick your hands up. They should stay relaxed at the wrist. It's simply the rotation of the elbows and the turning of the wrists that causes this look. And as you do this, think of stretching them a little bit. Okay? Please. Okay. Ready? And prepare. Sit down. Now raise the hands and stretch. So now the elbows sink down like this. And now we have the kind of feeling of twisting the arm like this. And the hands stretch forward. Okay? After doing this, release them so the elbows start to stick out and retract to this position. Okay. Let's do that again. So from here, and why don't you turn this way this time so they can see the other side. Turn to face me, all right. You can say the same, Sash. All right, so first, preparation, then raise the hands and stretch out. And once more. So, Now we retract them like this. And now when we lower them, as you lower, the elbows rotate slowly to the back and you come to your original position. So again, starting from this position, raise. Okay, once more. Go ahead. Now, as your hands come down, they must come right by the sides, as though you're kind of pushing yourself up like this. Now, you see, sometimes people just do a kind of, let's say, theatrical kind of version of this in which they simply do this. There's nothing really wrong with this as long as you have the right internal feeling, but it still should have these elements. This raise, this stretch, release, and down. When I learned this movement from Zhen Ching, he used to do this. And then he would sometimes be facing like this, and after he would do it, he would look around to see if everyone was following him. And there was a joke in the school that the poor students didn't quite understand that this was not really something you should do, but something he was just using to indicate that you felt alive in your hands. So the poor students did this. But the really poor students did this. So remember, when you copy my movements or anyone's movements, try to understand what is relevant about the movement and don't just copy everything you see and every bit of their personality. One of the difficulties of Tai Chi Chuan is that it is relatively invisible in terms of the actual things you're doing, whereas someone's personality is never invisible. So it's quite common for students to copy their teacher's personality and think that by doing this, they have learned Tai Chi Chuan. So remember, there's quite a variety of personalities that do Tai Chi Chuan correctly. Copying anyone's is not going to get you anywhere. Try to see the movement itself.